This is the first exhibition of works by Piero della Francesca in the United States. All were painted by Piero della Francesca for San Sepolcro. And they represent two separate altarpiece commissions that he received for this town. This altarpiece was commissioned in 1454 from Piero della Francesca for the Church of Sant'Agostino in the city of Borgo San Sepolcro. He completed it about 14 years later in 1469, so it was quite a lengthy commission. And that also speaks to its size. As far as we know, it was his largest altarpiece for Borgo San Sepolcro. It measured over 12 feet across and probably more than that high. In fact, it towered over the high altar of this church and was so large that it had to be supported by buttresses, or the feet that you see on either side of the altar in this diagram. The rest of the great panels that you see in this diagram suggest the paintings that were lost. Now, this reconstruction is based both on documentary evidence, on physical evidence, but also on intuition. We do not have a document, for example, that says that there were saints in the piers on either side. But we do know for other contemporary altarpieces from this town that small figures of saints appeared on the left and right. So we have to assume that this altarpiece would have had them decorating it as well. This altarpiece also has a complicated history. After it was finished in 1469, it stood over the high altar for approximately 100 years before it was disassembled in the mid-16th century. Its fragments, its paintings were dispersed across 2 continents, and today only 8 survive. We have brought together in this exhibition 6 of those 8 paintings. In 1936, Helen Clay Frick, that is Henry Clay Frick's daughter, advocated for acquisition this wonderful painting by Piero della Francesca, and it was immediately accepted by the Board of Trustees. It was a fortuitous acquisition because the Frick collection had only opened several months earlier, and it really inaugurated the opening with a painting by one of Miss Frick's favorite painters. He lived into extreme old age, and you see him here. Piero cast him as an older man with snowy white hair, a bristly beard pointed in 2 points, sunburnt skin, and bare feet and hands. Hands that hold open an absolutely beautiful book, which has decorating its cover all of the applied metalwork detail that you also see on the figure of St. Leonard behind us. St. John is a wonderful contrast with the St. Augustine we saw before, because he's rendered it with comparative simplicity. He has none of the elaboration or the material detail that Piero invested St. Augustine with, and yet he has a monumental and powerful presence. His 2 arms push at the heavy folds of this red, vermilion almost cloak, and he hunches forward, as you would imagine an old man reading from a book, to see the text that he is reading. Now, this book could be either his gospel or perhaps the book of Revelation, but one of the wonderful things about this painting is how Piero creates a sense of imminence and presence. St. John is not moving at all. He's a completely stationary figure, and yet the pages of his book are just very carefully lifting from the binding, as if the reading that he's doing, this cerebral activity, is somehow evoked in the painting itself. I would like to finish with the Williamstown altarpiece. Unlike the other paintings in this room, this painting was a separate altarpiece, and in a very different format, as you can see from the diagram that we looked at. Piero painted it in a rectangular format, which is, of course, very familiar to all of us from all of the museums that we go to. But at the time in Borgo San Sepolcro, which favored the Gothic polyptych, this would have been somewhat of a novelty, the Renaissance rectangle, if you will. This painting probably dates to around the same time as the Sant'Agostino altarpiece, painted in the 1460s or 1470s. We don't know who the patron was. We don't know exactly where it came from. It's possible that it may have been painted for a private palace. It's also possible that it could have been painted for the chapel of a church. One of the amazing things about this painting is the number of figures that Piero is able to compress into actually quite a small space. He gives you 6 full-length figures, all clustered together around the Virgin and Child. The Virgin and Child sit enthroned on a plinth or a pedestal, Christ on her lap, and 4 angels staking out the 4 corners of this platform, surrounded by this amazing fictive fantasy of classical architecture. And that too is one of the great geniuses of this painting. You get this incredibly elaborate all'antica architecture, which is framing the figures beautifully, but yet is implausible, because if the Virgin, this giant monumental figure, were to stand up, she would crash right through the top of it. And Piero has actually managed to convey her figure entirely plausibly as a larger figure than the others, that is indicative of her position in the celestial hierarchy and is the devotional focus of this painting, but yet one that if you look at this painting for a while, you realize is actually completely implausible. So he's played almost a trick on us.